Dr. Brandy Stamper is joining me on today's episode. Brandy is a mom of two wonderful children and a devoted wife to her soulmate. An educational leader turned success coach, hailing from North Carolina, she enjoys living life to the fullest and cherishing every experience. Brandy has been working on higher education for the past 15 years as an associate teaching professor, where she has helped thousands of students develop their leadership, personal, and corporate communication skills. Despite having a successful career and a loving family, she experienced burnout, overwhelm, and guilt from missing out on the things that mattered most to her. Through trial and error, she discovered the secret to achieving balance, fulfillment, and an authentic life. Now, as a professional development and success coach, Dr. Stamper helps high achieving women become unstuck and take back control of their careers and lives. Through her work, she works with her clients to achieve their goals in a way that feels authentic, fun, and sustainable so that they can expand their income and impact without compromising who they are or what matters most. She shares so many great tips on managing your energy, working through perfectionism and people pleasing, as well as finding joy in life. Here's our conversation.
So welcome, Dr. Brandy, to Imperfection in Progress podcast. I am really excited to have you here with us today.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Can you tell us a little bit about why you do what you do?
Yeah, so a little bit about my background. I am a communication studies teaching professor. So I am at the university teaching students, we look at different communication aspects of the communication process, from public speaking, business communication, all those fun things, the classes that students don't like to take because you have to get up and speak in front of people. So I've been doing that for 15 years and it's something that I enjoy. However, I did not feel fulfilled in my work. I felt like there was always just something in the background that I could do more, and that I really enjoy working with women and helping them empower, coming from a sense of empowerment and helping them succeed in whatever they want to do. And so I was like, you know what? This is a little bit more of my calling. I enjoy what I do with teaching, but there's something more. And so that something more for me was starting my own coaching business. So working with women on their leadership development as well as their success in their careers. So that's how I got from point A to point B.
I love hearing when women are doing something that they enjoy or to more or less extent, but then realize "Mm, there's something bigger out there calling me." I hear this a lot, and I think it's interesting that especially as entrepreneurs, that often when we start out, we don't always know what we're being called to, and I think that's okay. So I love that that's part of your story is you knew there was something bigger.
Absolutely. And I think it's what's interesting is that we'll probably talk about this a little bit as well, but it's this idea of I really got in tune with myself and really just looked at what my intentions were and really just kind of got down to the brass tacks, if you will, of what is exciting for me? What do I really enjoy? What thrills me? And really just got into that vision. And I think part of it, what you'll see with entrepreneurs and other things with energy management is this idea of visioning, really getting to the core of what do you want and why. And that's what really helped move me along the path of becoming a coach was this is my why. And now I'm really in alignment with that. So it's really cool to kind of come full circle with that.
Yeah. And I think a lot of times too, when you just know there's something, it can be really a little bit frustrating because you feel like I'm chasing something because I know I'm not in quite the right alignment. And yet it can be hard to know, like, what is it? I'm good at this. I like that. This is attractive. I've taken this course, right? Like all these different things. Where do you suggest that we start looking when we're feeling like there's something more I'd like to be doing?
Oh, wow. So that's a fun question, but also like it could be very detailed. So I'll try and sum it up as easy as, or not easy, but as short as I can. But part of it is really coming to know who we are. Okay. Even though we have these pieces of, we know that we're good at this, we know that we enjoy this. Sometimes with everything that happens in the world, we tend to just go surface level. So it's really getting deeper with who you are and really spending that time. I have two children and I'm married to my high school sweetheart. We just celebrated 15 years of marriage, but we've been together for like 23 years. I've lost count after a certain time, but so I had all these things going on, right? And so I really had to sit with myself and get uncomfortable, if you will, because sometimes as women, we forget to sit with ourselves and self care we've heard about, but sit with ourselves and really ask some of those uncomfortable questions and be okay with the answer or be okay with the idea of I'm doing something that I like, but it's not really me and be like, that's okay. So for example, I like to call myself a recovering people pleaser. And so the things that I did becoming a professor and teaching and getting degree after degree after degree, while those are all wonderful experiences, I've learned so much and it's helped me become the person that I am. I've realized that I kept chasing those achievements, not for myself. It was more chasing to get approval of other people. And I really had to sit with myself and be like, is this for me or is this actually for someone else? And so I think the first step is really spending time and asking those tough questions in a time where you can reflect. So I do like a visioning exercise with a lot of my clients, and we actually spend a couple of weeks on this visioning because sometimes when we first start sitting in a visioning and we ask, well, what do we want? We'll say, oh, I want this, this, and this. And then sometimes we feel very selfish for wanting these things. And we have to kind of get through some of that and understand that selfishness, it's not. It's part of what you want and who you want to be. And that is totally okay. And that is phenomenal. And we have to become more authentic and real with ourselves. So I think the first step would be visioning and figuring out truly who you are. What do you want is I think the first step.
Yeah. I love hearing that because it can be really uncomfortable to sit and start digging and thinking about what we want and being okay with the fact that we actually want something, like that selfish
Mhm.
feeling that people often think that's what it is. And in reality, getting to know ourselves because many times, and I think with you being a mom and me being a mom, we've put a lot of our wants and desires on hold because we're doing things for others and we've taken on a nurturing role and so on. And so we forget about that.
Mhm. Absolutely.
So I would love for us to be able to talk a little bit more about energy management. You've mentioned it a couple times, and I think that's a part as women for sure, where again, we often will do things for others. We'll people please, we will take on a role, and yet we are exhausted and having a hard time actually even having enough left to want to run a business, to want to do something for ourselves. And what do we
Mhm.
do with that? How do we guard that? For the months of July, August, and September, we are focusing on being a woman entrepreneur. I know personally that along my journey, there have been some amazing coaches who have helped me figure out exactly what I wanted to do and how I wanted it to look and feel. Sometimes the overwhelm was crazy, and I needed that outside view to help simplify what I needed to focus on and to keep me accountable. My favorite thing about working with a coach is that I get more done in less time. Whether it is learning to manage my time, having step by step actions to complete a goal, or having someone to help me overcome limiting beliefs and mindset blocks, the coaches I have worked with have been a huge part of my success. Maybe you're looking for a coach or are curious if it's something you need. Because I believe so highly in helping women on their journey, I want to offer you something special. Each month, from July through September, I'm offering 30-minute strategy calls for free to the first 6 women who book a call with me. Each month, 6 new spots will open, and I hope you will take advantage of this time to get clear on where you are and where you want to go. I love learning about the women in my community, and I'm looking forward to hearing about what you want to create. Book your call by clicking on the link in the show notes, or go to my podcast page on my website, pursueprogress.com/podcast. These 6 spots are first come, first serve, so don't wait. Now, back to the podcast.
Yeah. So energy management is very similar to, I guess, what I talked about with visioning. There's multiple layers. Okay. So we have like these outer layers, surface layers that we can begin to work on, but know that in order to have sustainable change, we really have to get to those inner layers. So I kind of call it like again, if you've ever watched Shrek, an ogre has many layers. It's like an onion. Again, kids watching fun things. So it's very similar. I equate that to an onion is that, yeah, we do have a lot of layers or cake. Cake is always a good one, right? So cake has layers. So we could just say cake if we want to. But so first, there's a couple of things we can do to start off to help as an entrepreneur because you're trying to do and be all the things as an entrepreneur. You're trying to create the website, you're trying to do social media, you're trying to find clients, and then you're honing in on your craft. So we've got all these different pieces in these different buckets. And there are some strategies that we can use to help manage your energy in a way However, at that time, if we don't go deeper and really get into figure out what are the things that are sucking your energy, then it can it can all like fizzle out, if you will. So the first thing when I talk about, like especially with my clients, one is let's look at some of those strategies. So we have time saving strategies and those different pieces. But the first thing whenever we're looking at with a business is, have you ever heard of the 80-20 rule with
Mhm.
business? You do, yeah. So it's the same idea is where with the 80-20 rule, you do the 20% of the aspects of your business that will take care of 80% of the business. So for example, as a coaching, so as a coach, the 20% of my business is really putting content, number one, putting content out there for everybody to find out some of these cool tips and tricks to really, really help them because it's all about helping people, right? I'm not here to be like, oh, I want you to be my client. I mean, of course, I want clients, right? But at the same time, I'm here to help empower women, to help them be more successful. So part of that's that content. That's part of my 20% that will take care of the 80% of my business. And so when I think about content, I'm not going to be on the computer all day long because I have a family, I have a business, I have other things. So what I do is I chunk or time block. You might have heard time blocking. So what I do is I say, okay, I'm going to plan out my content for the month of June, and I'm going to do that on Monday, this particular day, and I'm going to reserve 2 hours to take care of that or whatever that may be, or if it to take the day, whatever it is. But I've got that 20% of time that I spent on time blocking for my social media content and my articles, blogs, all those other things. I've got that taken care of for the month of June. And I even have a calendar that I've planned out for 6 months. So I can say these are the topics I'm talking about for 6 months and I have certain times. So time blocking is a big one, but it's taking care of that 20% that will cover that 80%. So I think as an entrepreneur, when you start off, some of those strategies are very helpful, like time blocking to say, because we can get bogged down in detail and details are fun and they're great. However, they can really derail us because if we spend time trying to write the perfect blog post or the perfect social media post, it suck up a whole day. And then we have our children at the same time who are like, hey, mommy, come play with me. Or mommy, I have a flower. Come see, come see. Oh, I'll be there in a minute, honey. I'll be there in a minute. And we miss out on those precious moments. And the part of the reason why we want to be an entrepreneur is for freedom. And part of that freedom is to, for example, in my case, to be more present with my children or to have time freedom, financial freedom, whatever that may be. And so we have to think about what's the reason why we did it, right? And one of it is have more time with my children. And I can't be like, oh, I'll be there in a minute, right? Now, there are ebbs and flows, right? There are sometimes we have to get certain things done. But if we can say, here's the top 20% of what we need, and here's what we can do in order to take care of some of those pieces, that's the first step. Then I could go deeper, but I don't want to like spend time talking specifically on all these other things. So what's something else I could also add to that?
Well, I think it's interesting too when you're saying we got into this for freedom, and often that doesn't become the case. Often we're working 24/7 because there is no end to the day and there is no boss saying, I just need this today. And we can, I guess, we can really think that we need to constantly be doing, doing, doing. And in reality, we don't actually produce as much when we do that. But it is something that I think is a false belief that many of us that are entrepreneurs believe we have to do more frequently, longer, and yet we lose those precious moments that you're talking about. So when we're talking about helping as far as conserving our energy and really being careful about, again, maximizing what we're producing, but at the same time, also getting that freedom, what do we do there? How do we differentiate whether what I'm doing is a time producer or is a productivity, I guess, producer rather than just work to
Yeah.
be doing?
Exactly. So then this is something that we call energy audits. So this is where it's really the first step of energy management, where we really look at our patterns and identify areas of inefficiency and look for areas of improvement. So for example, if you notice like you have a hard time or it takes a very long time to write social media content. Or for example, I have a client right now and she's working on different LinkedIn posts. And she has a resistance, which a lot of women, especially in entrepreneurs as well, run into. I call flavors of resistance. And one flavor of resistance is about perfection. And as high achieving women and anyone who's an entrepreneur is whether if it's a male or a female, are very high achieving because there's a want to do something more and they've done well in other things and they want more for whatever XYZ. So when it comes to perfectionism, what happens is this is an energy sucker because we are wanting to get this exact social media post right. It has to be perfect, has to have the right emojis, has to say the right things, has to have the right keywords, all these other pieces. And from there, if we only assign 20 minutes and we're on 2 hours, but working on the same post, that's when we have to realize, oh, wait, hold on. This should not have taken this long. So what's lying up underneath that particular post? So part of it is also examining when we see certain activities that is sucking out our energy, we have to look at underneath. So that's that next layer. So why? Is one of the flavors of resistant perfectionism or people pleasing, right? So if it's perfectionism, what are some different techniques that we can use to help us work through that perfectionism? So part of it is like, for example, with my particular client, we're working on different mantras and setting specific time limits and then walking away and posting or going forward even if it's not perfect. So like for example, one mantra and affirmation is progress, not perfection. And statistics actually show, and I share with my clients as well, that statistics show that people who are perfectionists, their content that they produce is 80% better than someone who is not, even if they think it's not perfect or if they think it's not ready. It's actually 80% more ready than someone else who was just creating. And so part of that is that recognition and working through some of those pieces. So when an energy audit, first see how much time it's taking you to do something is like the first step. If it's taking you like 2 hours to do something, ask why. Is it because you keep going down a rabbit hole? You keep looking all these different things. Well, why is that? All right. So, and that's part of where coaching really comes in because we really get to work together. And I ask, well, what's going on when it comes? Oh, well, I found this thing. I found this information. I found this. I want to put it all together. I want it to be perfect. Oh, well, what does perfect mean to you? And we dig deeper. And then as we start to work through that, we start to come up with strategies to say, oh, okay. For example, let's just say you put a timer for 20 minutes. You've 20 minutes, you feel like you didn't get anywhere. Okay, what's happening? Yeah, I'm trying to say something that's perfect. So then we walk away. So I always tell my clients walk away for an hour, come back to it later. So and reset. And then set an intention. So the third part would be like set an intention. So if I come back an hour later and I say, okay, my intention for this blog post is to write 3 paragraphs on XYZ within 30 minutes. And I am going to get this done because if you set a goal, especially with a perfectionist, when you set a goal that I'm going to get this done in 30 minutes, it's going to happen just because that's how we operate. And I'm a perfectionist. So I can speak to that recovering perfectionist. We'll put it that way. So, and go with it. And then once you finish with that 30 minutes, walk away. Do not even judge it. And then come back again in 30 minutes. And typically when your brain research shows that when your brain has time to sit and like almost reset itself, when you come back and you look at what you produce, you're like, wow, that's pretty freaking good. And then you get out of that judgment zone. So those are some techniques that I would say to start off with entrepreneurs is look at that 80-20 rule, 20%, and then figure out specifically what's sucking just one thing. Start off with one thing. What's sucking your energy out? What's taking you too long? And let's get up underneath. Why is that happening? And let's try and set some small little techniques to help you work through that. But then you will have to go deeper because even if you recognize that this is taking 2 hours, eventually, once you figure that out for that social media post, it's going to go somewhere else. And then you're going to have the same problem somewhere else. And then we got to get deeper. Why is this going on? And address the deeper inner layer piece.
I love hearing this. I mean, this podcast is all about people pleasing, perfectionism, procrastination. And for sure, when I talk to entrepreneurs, one of the big ones is perfectionism. So I love that you address that. And even the statistic that it's 80% better than others who are just creating. I think that's interesting. I've never heard that before, but that should really make you feel like you can put it out there, like just let it go. So I love to hear that.
Yeah. And the other piece too is that people like to see that you're human. right? And I think part of as a perfectionist, you want it to be perfect because you want people to see you as worthy or to see you as an authority in something. And we tend to forget that people like authenticity. And we tend to, as leaders, as entrepreneurs, we do better and people believe in our product or are more likely to contract with us when they see you as a human. They see part of the imperfection. And that's something I think as our society, we forget that it's all about authenticity. If you come at it as this is who I am and you put yourself out there, even if it's not perfect, you're more likely to get more out of it than you are if you try to be like stuffy and the perfect person because we're not perfect. And if you put on that persona or if it comes off across that way, you could lose sales, you could lose and you lose yourself as well because it's almost like faking it, if you will. You're putting on this persona of perfection and it'll wear you down and burn you out, overwhelm, and it just becomes a domino effect.
Yeah, I love to hear this. One thing I know for me personally, because I also call myself a recovering perfectionist, that's where I tend to gravitate and theory that I'm always working on. But as an entrepreneur, that's an area where I can get really stuck because I want to put out the best. I want it to be just right. So when it comes to social media, when it comes to my newsletter, when it comes to those types of things, and that's one of the reasons why I started the podcast Imperfection in Progress. And I did it in 6 weeks because I said to myself, you have to just do it. Have been wanting to do it for a year, but if you just sit there and constantly try to make sure it's going to be as good as somebody that's been doing a podcast for 5 years, it's never going to happen. So let's just get this out there and put it out. And it's probably the best thing I've ever done for myself in working through perfectionism. And I know that that's something that if you're listening to this and perfectionism gets you stuck, sometimes you just have to do the thing. Like you really literally just
Yes.
have to do the thing. Would you say?
Oh, yeah, absolutely, and it's so hard. Like, my website, whenever I was getting my website together, I can't tell you how many times I kept going through different copy and like, "Oh, I need to change this, I need to change that." And finally, I just said, "Put it out there. It's ready." Like, why do I keep doing this? Just do it. And once I did it, I asked a friend when I went live, I said, "Would you please be a editor and just make sure I spell things right?" Because when you get in the thick of things, like, you miss something that to you would be obvious, but you miss it because you're in it. And she texts me back and she goes, "This is fabulous. I only found 2 issues." And I was like, "Are you kidding me?" She goes, "Yeah." I was like, "Oh, okay." But exactly, I think it's easier said than done. And it's almost one of those things that I sometimes have to put a time limit on myself and say, like, my goal for my website was to launch it in April. And my April due date kept coming up, it was coming. And I said, "I'm not gonna surpass it. I will hit the publish button on this date." And sometimes I have to do that because if I don't, I was like, "Oh, a little bit more time. I need a little bit more time tinkering." So absolutely. I think it's so important. You just do the thing. Just do it because you'll learn more if you do it rather than not. Like you have to, and I talk about this with my students too, like you have to fail. And I hate the term fail because you never fail in anything. It's opportunities for growth and opportunities to learn. So if you don't do it, you're never going to learn. You're never going to grow. So put yourself out there and do it. Right.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's where you start to develop confidence in your ability, confidence that what you put out there, you start to hear back from people and they're appreciating something and you never even would have gotten any of those responses or those even if they're criticisms, you wouldn't have that to work from in order to grow and to make something better if you didn't put it out. So I think that is super important.
Mhm. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So one last question for you because you've alluded to this, but I always ask, what do you relate to the most? Is it the people pleasing? Is it the perfectionism? Is it the procrastination?
Oh, the people pleasing and perfectionism are my top two. If I had to choose number one, I think it'd have to be perfectionism. And the only reason why I choose the perfectionism over people pleasing is while I want others to, well, as I recover from this, but others to like me or to accept me, I think the drive to be perfect is higher because in order for people to like me per se, I have to be perfect. Right. So even though they're so intermingled, I think it would have to be perfectionism. And it is, it takes time. Like it still happens, right? And people pleasing still happens. But what's really nice is that different techniques like setting boundaries and having those affirmations or just do it, right? Like you start working through it and it starts to become easier. So yeah, I would say perfectionism.
I like hearing this because I think it's important for people to understand it's not like it's done and over. It's not like you're like, oh, no, I'm no longer a perfectionist. It's just never an issue in my life. If we tend to gravitate towards that, it's something that comes up over and over. It may be less often, or it may be that we catch it earlier and we're able to deal
Mhm.
with it and we have more tools, but it's still there.
Exactly, exactly. And what's nice is if I wasn't a perfectionism or a people pleaser, I would not have learned these different techniques and it would not have helped me grow as a person because we all have our own trials and tribulations that we go through. We have our different challenges, but they're meant to be opportunities to help us grow and to become a better person, right? And so for those who are not perfectionists, they might be people pleasers, and so they need more tools and techniques and strategies to really work through to understand their self-worth and why setting particular boundaries in work or in their personal and professional lives is so important to help with their self-worth. Whereas a perfectionist, there could be some self-worth pieces underlying that. However, it's more about understanding that what you produce, it's not tied specifically to who you are as a person. Because sometimes I think perfectionists tie the idea of if it's not perfect, this means I'm not a good or a perfect person. And that's not the case. Sometimes we tend to attribute behaviors to our self-worth. And that's something that is really important to continue to work on because you have different layers, right? It always comes back up. So absolutely.
I know that you've given us a freebie and it's a guide about regaining balance. So, can you tell us a little bit about how that's going to help us?
Yeah. So if you are a people pleaser, perfectionist, or procrastination, what's really cool about this particular freebie is that it just gives you 10 easy techniques to help create balance in your life. So if you find yourself that you want to be more present with your children or with your family or with your partner, whoever it may be, there's a couple of techniques to really help you out that some are they're science backed as well. So for example, like one is technology about taking your phone out of your room right? Before you go to bed. And there's a lot of different scientific studies behind it, but that really is your room is supposed to be a place of solace. It's supposed to be a place of sleep. And sometimes when we create that, have that blue light in our room, it really throws off sleep patterns and we understand we need sleep. So what's nice about this, there are easy techniques for you to try that you can start to incorporate within an hour of reading it, right? And there are 10 different strategies. There are tons more that I tend to share on my blog and so forth, but this will definitely help you get started on reclaiming your happiness as well as your balance between personal and professional life and your joy, right? So it's all about being joyful. And so it's really helping you create that balance again for yourself.
I love that this is what you're offering, especially since what we're creating on a daily basis is what then becomes our life. And so I can see that this is going to be really helpful for that. You can find this in the show notes. So if you're looking for the freebie, just go to the show notes. You'll also find all the contact info for Dr. Brandy there. But where is a really good spot if somebody wants to look you up right now? Where can they find you?
Yeah, so I hang out on LinkedIn mostly. I do have Instagram and I post a couple things on Instagram, but if you really want me, LinkedIn is the place to go. Connect with me and we can chat back and forth. I'd love to.
Is there anything that you'd like to say to our audience before we close for today?
Yes. So to all my perfectionists out there, progress, not perfection, right? That is the big mantra or affirmation I want to leave for my perfectionists out there. Progress, not perfection is so much better than not doing anything at all. So,
Yes, it's so true. Thank you. And thank you for joining us on the podcast. It was so great to have you with us.
oh, thank you so much for having me. And thank you for putting this podcast out. I think it's phenomenal. And kudos to you for getting it out within 6 weeks.
Thanks so much.
You're welcome.